Hey guys, tonight we drift together into the timeless currents of history. As we gently step into the moonlit waters of the Nile, imagine the breeze carrying soft whispers of palm trees, guiding us toward the story of Cleopatra, her love affairs, and the slow, inevitable fall of Egypt. This isn't a tale of turmoil, but of quiet landscapes, candlelit chambers, and the steady rhythm of time. Let's move gently, as though walking along ancient corridors, where echoes of the past linger like the scent of jasmine in warm night air. You would not survive here without mosquito repellent, honestly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want, share your location and the time of night in the comments. I love imagining where you all are listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Nile stretches before you, wide and unhurried, its silver surface glowing beneath the moon. You hear a quiet ripple against the reed-lined banks, as though the river itself breathes softly in its sleep. The night is alive with gentle sounds, the distant flap of a nightbird, the subtle hum of insects, and the faint echo of voices carried across the water. The river has been a companion to countless generations, each gazing at its patient flow as you do now. History feels like people trying to sleep too, quietly fumbling with the hours as they pass. You walk along a narrow sand path where your steps leave soft impressions, quickly smoothed by the cool night breeze. The air smells faintly of earth, water, and something sweet, like dates left too long in a basket. Palm fronds sway overhead, their movement hypnotic, shadows painting gentle patterns across the sand. Mud brick houses cluster in the distance, rooftops leaning like friends in quiet companionship. A dog barks once and then decides sleep is more rewarding. Time feels suspended. Stars shine with steadiness, as if they know centuries of secrets but choose silence. You trace a constellation, imagining it as a lantern hung in the vast ceiling of night. The wind brushes your skin, drawing a slow, deep exhale from your chest. There is no rush here. The river does not hurry, and neither should you. Your thoughts drift slowly toward ancient Egypt, a civilization whose rhythms followed the pulse of this very river. You picture farmers leaning on simple wooden tools, eyes tracking the Nile's rise and fall, measuring its gifts with patience honed over generations. The silt left behind nourished crops, promising abundance, while its absence brought quiet hardship. Tonight, the river lies calm, indulgent almost, as if it watches you imagining these lives with quiet amusement. Perhaps it even chuckles softly at your late-night reflections, just as you smile to yourself. You pause for a moment, listening closely to the current. It moves with gentle persistence, a heartbeat beneath the land, steady and reassuring. The water catches the moonlight, shimmering in pale silver and faint blues, rippling delicately like silk stirred by an unseen hand. You imagine Cleopatra herself standing here long ago, her gaze tracing the river's flow with quiet contemplation. The thought is tender, intimate, a reminder that even queens, with the weight of kingdoms on their shoulders, sought moments of stillness where the world could pause around them. A small boat creaks softly at the dock, its ropes slack as the tide rocks it gently. The sound seems almost like a lullaby, a wooden cradle rocking in the night. You picture someone stepping aboard, pushing off slowly, gliding across the water under the steady moon, unhurried and unbound. In this quiet moment, it seems possible to float endlessly, carried not toward any destination, but simply by the river's gentle rhythm. Perhaps sleep itself is just such a vessel, a quiet passage downstream, where the mind drifts and settles, as if borne by the soft current of the Nile. The scent of lotus drifts faintly, petals pale with golden centers that capture imagined sunlight. In ancient times, the lotus symbolized rebirth, rising from water each day. You imagine a young Cleopatra playing among these blossoms, her laughter carried away on the same breeze, brushing your cheeks. History, you realize, is a series of such whispers, the echoes of simple, tender moments. Moonlight arcs higher, stretching shadows across sand and stone. You feel companionship with this gentle observer, a silver sentinel of night. It has seen empires rise and fall, yet remains patient, offering quiet guidance. You cannot help but think of it as the ultimate gossip, having observed every secret silently. You continue walking, feeling history settle gently around you, not heavy, but protective, like a soft quilt draped over your shoulders. Each step is slow and deliberate. The sand glimmers faintly beneath your feet, reeds hum softly with insect life, and a clay jar knocks against a wall in quiet rhythm. Ordinary things seem touched by magic tonight, if only you notice. The river widens before you, horizon and sky blending into a seamless silver expanse. Stars shimmer in the water, mirrored like tiny lanterns suspended across eternity. You imagine the ancients standing here long ago, humbled by the vastness, their hearts quieted by the same moonlight that bathes you now. Power is fleeting, but the moon and river endure. Breathing with the river, you inhale as it rises, exhale as it flows. Your eyes drift half closed, not fully asleep, but attentive, attuned to the gentle rhythm of night. Faint torchlight flickers across the distant banks, and you hear soft voices sharing stories at an unhurried pace. Storytelling is time travel without luggage. You think with a quiet smile. Night deepens, yet it does not darken. It glows with the hush of stillness. Your thoughts float like leaves on the river, carried gently downstream. Moonlight, water, and stars weave a quiet lullaby, wrapping the world in soft luminescence. Cleopatra's presence feels near, her footsteps echoing softly through the corridors of history. You follow, not rushing, letting the current of night guide you, serene and weightless, toward gentle dreams that drift endlessly along the silver Nile. You step into Alexandria as if moving from a dream into a waking vision, though the two feel almost the same. The streets stretch before you in quiet order, paved with pale stone that catches sunlight by day and moonlight by night. Each block seems carved with care, as if someone hummed a slow, soothing tune while shaping it. The stones still hold the warmth of the day, softened beneath your feet. You imagine sandals as the ancient version of air conditioning and smile softly at the thought. The air smells different from the riverside, carrying a faint saltiness from the sea, mingled with delicate incense drifting from courtyards. Voices murmur gently, not hurried, as people greet one another in overlapping languages, their words flowing like soft waves. Traders, sailors, scholars, and dreamers all move along the streets, their steps weaving subtle stories across the marble paths. The sound is less a crowd and more a calm conversation among friends. Alexandria itself seems to whisper, "Slow down. There is time here." Columns rise along the boulevards, elegant and deliberate, their capitals carved with intricate patterns that invite your eyes to linger. Streets open wide to sun and moon, lined with fig trees and olive branches swaying in the evening breeze. Merchants settle for the night, pottery clinking softly as stalls are covered, goods guarded by trust rather than locks. There is no rush here, only a steady, calm rhythm. If cities could breathe, Alexandria would exhale slowly, carrying centuries of thought and life within its quiet streets. At the city's heart stands the great library, a sanctuary of knowledge that draws scholars like moths to candlelight. Halls stretch endlessly, scrolls stacked higher than your gaze, each a fragile piece of the world captured in ink. The library was once the largest collection of human wisdom, a treasure not of gold, but of ideas. You almost hear the rustle of parchment, a music more soothing than any lullaby, inviting even the most restless mind to pause. You wander slowly past the imagined shelves, your steps hushed, as though even silence wishes not to disturb the words. Oil lamps glow along the walls, their flames small but steady, casting scrolls and halos of amber light. Scholars sit with lowered heads, fingers gliding across papyrus, lips moving in quiet murmur. The rhythm of reading feels contagious. You almost sense your own eyes tracing invisible letters, your thoughts falling into step with this hidden symphony of knowledge. The mystery of the library hangs heavy yet strangely light. No one truly knows how it ended. Fires are whispered, invasions speculated, accidents suspected, yet certainty never found. The greatest collection of human curiosity dissolved like mist at dawn, leaving only fragments and longing. Historians still debate whether Caesar's flames or later chaos sealed its fate. You smile softly at the irony, so much written about knowledge. Yet knowledge itself vanished, slipping away like sand through open hands. Still, you imagine it alive. Scholars arriving from distant lands, scrolls under arm, sandals dusty, eyes shining with wonder. They gather not as rivals, but as seekers, their voices weaving one great conversation. Perhaps wisdom, you think, is nothing more than curiosity in sandals. Beyond the library, Alexandria's streets stretch lazily toward the sea. You follow the briny scent of the Mediterranean and the soft rhythm of waves brushing against stone. In the distance, the great lighthouse Pharos rises, its flame glowing like a star captured on earth. Though far, its presence feels near, a silent guardian for sailors, a promise of safe passage. Its light sweeps across the horizon with calm assurance. If the moon had an apprentice, it would surely be this lighthouse. Steady, reliable, never gossiping about ships that arrive late. Evening cools as soft breezes slip across your skin, lifting the edges of your clothing like playful fingers. City sounds soften, replaced by the gentle cadence of waves. Nearby, musicians pluck strings, their notes floating freely, unhurried, inviting you simply to listen, to hum along if you wish, never demanding an ending. It feels as though the city itself is singing you toward rest, each note another feather on a pillow of sound. Along the docks, ships sway gently, masts rising like forest trees. Ropes creak, wood shifts, the sea breathes against stone walls. Sailors settle on deck, telling stories with laughter warm but distant. Each vessel carries journeys, people, goods, and memories between worlds. Alexandria is more than a city. It is a crossroads, a place where ideas arrive as often as cargo. Perhaps the ancient version of the internet, though with fewer cat pictures and far more sand. You pause at the water's edge, lanterns flickering softly against the tide. Their reflections tremble, doubling the city in shimmering light, one version on land, one in water. It feels as if you stand between two worlds, both real, both calm. The salt air fills your lungs, refreshing and gentle, carrying a quiet invitation to breathe slowly. You imagine Cleopatra walking here too, her gaze drifting to the sea, mind moving between power and poetry, perhaps finding the hum of waves more comforting than the hum of politics. As night deepens, Alexandria does not fully sleep. Lamps glow in courtyards, whispers drift along the streets, and scrolls lie open on tables, unfinished yet alive with curiosity. There is no rush, only the steady pulse of learning and reflection. The library may have vanished, but its spirit lingers, settling into your thoughts with a soft invitation to carry knowledge lightly, without burden. You walk slowly through the streets, arches curving gently, doorways carved with intricate patterns. Shadows stretch and fold, wrapping the city in silk-like quiet. Each wall leans not with tension, but with trust in the stones beside it. Endurance feels like standing still, leaning softly, never rushing. Your steps become slower as night thickens, and you sense the city breathing in rhythm with you. Alexandria, for all its grandeur, is not lost. It lives in imagination, in whispers, in stories told beneath the soft glow of moon and lamp. Waves lap unhurriedly against the shore, and the lighthouse sweeps its steady light across the horizon. You rest your eyes on that gentle glow, reminded that even amid mystery and loss, light persists and knowledge never disappears. You breathe with the city, slowly and calmly, ready to carry the echo of Alexandria into the next step of your journey. You step into a secluded garden, its high walls rising like protectors, keeping the city's noise at bay so that softer sounds may take root. The evening air is heavy with perfumed lotus blossoms drift upon the still ponds, their petals wide and serene, carrying sweetness that lingers long after each breath. Around them, reeds rise patiently in green clusters, and insects hum in the quiet air, their wings flashing like tiny lanterns whenever they catch the fading light. A breeze slides across the water, stirring it into ripples that break the pond's stillness. In such a place, you imagine Cleopatra as a child, stepping carefully along smooth stones, her sandals slipping, her eyes wide with unguarded wonder. The palace garden is more than a place of beauty. It is a sanctuary. Tall palms lean overhead like loyal guardians, their fronds arching outward to shield against the fiercest sun. Narrow stone paths wander toward shaded corners, where marble benches wait for moments of rest and reflection. You picture the young princess sitting with a scroll across her lap, her finger hesitantly tracing symbols she cannot yet read. Instead, she listens to the patient voice of a tutor, words flowing like calm water. The garden itself becomes her first classroom, the blossoms her silent companions, nodding as if in agreement with every lesson carried on the wind. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE into a world already thick with expectation. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, descendants of Greek conquerors who ruled Egypt, yet stood apart from its deepest traditions. From the beginning, her life was a balancing act, two cultures meeting in one child. Perhaps her small hands clutched toys carved of ivory, while voices around her shifted from Greek to Egyptian. To her young ears, this did not sound like politics. It must have felt instead like living inside music, a constant harmony of languages. Later, she would be famed for her languages, some say 9 in all: Greek, Egyptian, Latin, and others that crossed borders. Was she truly fluent in them all? Or did legend inflate the number? You picture her by the lotus pond, practicing phrases, repeating them to the birds perched above. Maybe the birds cared little, but at least they never corrected her grammar. Her evenings must have been long and gentle, lit by oil lamps glowing along the paths. Shadows stretched across pillars. Laughter echoed lightly off cool stone. Music drifted from other chambers' flutes, lyres blending with cicadas outside. You picture her cross-legged beside a low table, arranging clay figures into worlds of her own. Palaces may be vast, yet childhood always finds secret corners. Lessons began early. Tutors traced constellations, showing how Sirius foretold the Nile's flood. She followed the star charts with eager fingers, as if she might draw rivers in the sky. Mathematics came in soft rhythms, numbers flowing like water. At first, learning was not duty, but play curiosity dressed in robes. Between studies, she wandered shaded paths, listening to fountains break silence with their measured drip. Goldfish turned lazily in basins, their scales flashing light. She knelt close, laughing at her reflection rippling back, doubled and distorted. The fish circled, unimpressed by dynasties, but curious about the child leaning over them. Inside the palace, corridors stretched long, walls painted in vivid scenes of gods and heroes. Cleopatra's footsteps echoed lightly through the painted corridors, her eyes tracing the vivid forms of Ides and Horus. To her they were not relics, but living figures, gods breathing within the colors. She stretched out her hand, eager to feel the painted lines, until attendants gently pulled her back. Perhaps, she thought, with a child's stubbornness, if I am to be queen, why should I not touch the walls? For children, testing boundaries is its own lesson. Often she slipped into shaded alcoves, where scrolls lay in careful order. The papyrus felt rough beneath her fingers, its surface holding secrets she longed to unlock. Even before she could read, she sensed their weight, words as vessels of power, ink flowing like rivers across time. As tutors read aloud, she watched their mouths, memorizing sounds before meaning, learning slowly but steadily, like the Nile itself. Her family life wrapped her in ritual. Banquets gathered relatives, nobles, and advisors. Platters of figs, pomegranates, roasted fish spread across tables as conversations unfolded. Cleopatra, still young, sat near her father, listening more than speaking. She noticed when voices softened, when laughter rang hollow, when silence held weight. Politics revealed itself, not through scrolls, but through tone. Even as a child, she sensed decisions carried echoes beyond words. The garden was her constant refuge, a place where time seemed to breathe in rhythm with her own. Each morning, the lotus blossoms unfurled like quiet suns upon the still ponds. Each evening, they folded shut, as though closing their eyes to dream. Their steady rhythm taught her something of patience. Within those walls, she whispered questions to the stars, repeated foreign words under her breath, and chased butterflies that refused to land on her small hands. Even future queens, it seemed, must learn the small disappointment of butterflies ignoring them. Beyond the sanctuary of trees and water, the Nile stretched wide and gleaming, its current glinting in the distance. From the palace walls she would lean forward, eyes following the sails that swelled like pale clouds, the voices of rowers carrying soft songs across the wind. Tutors spoke endlessly of its power, the river that fed the fields, the floods that shaped harvests and fortune alike. To her, it felt both intimate and endless, a familiar ribbon and yet an infinite horizon. Perhaps more than any lesson recited in stone chambers, this awareness stayed with her, that rulers, no matter how great, remained small before the river's eternal current. As the years passed, her steps through the palace corridors grew more certain, her voice surer, her gaze unflinching. She was still a child, yet already you sensed the quiet formation of resolve. The lotus ponds, the scrolls, the songs of sailors, all became threads in a fabric of steadiness. Surrounded by marble and gold, she learned that her true treasures lay in the hush of evenings, tracing ripples on water, asking questions of the stars. Greatness does not always begin with trumpets, but with whispers, laughter, and gardens, footsteps echoing softly in painted halls. The corridors of the palace grow quieter as torches burn low, their flames bending with each faint draught. Stillness hangs heavy, not with fragrance, but with expectation. Shadows stretch across carved columns, wavering as though the walls themselves wait. Into this hush Cleopatra walks, her sandals soft against polished stone. She is no longer the girl chasing butterflies in lotus gardens. Tonight, the palace leans forward to watch her first steps as queen. At the end of the great hall, the throne waits. Raised upon a platform, its golden edges shimmer in lamplight, almost mirage-like. Oil lamps glow along the walls, illuminating painted gods who gaze in silence from their forms. The hush is broken only by attendants shifting and bowing. Cleopatra pauses before ascending, steadying her breath. Her eyes are calm, though her heart must race beneath her robe. It is 51 BCE. Her father is gone, the kingdom in transition. Tradition demands continuity. Cleopatra and her younger brother are declared co-regents. She is scarcely into adulthood, yet must wear the crown, not as ornament, but anchor. The ceremony unfolds in measured rhythm, priests chanting blessings, advisors murmuring allegiance. The hall is less filled with power than with stillness, as though the gods themselves listen. No record tells what she felt. Did the weight of rule press heavily, or did a spark of excitement stir? The truth has dissolved in time, leaving only inscriptions stripped of emotion. You wonder whether she longed to slip away after the ritual, back to the quiet lotus pond of her childhood. Historians debate her poise in these first days. You imagine her balancing confidence with an unspoken wish for air. Around her, advisors stand in careful rows, their faces masks of curiosity and judgment. Servants bow, incense curls in the air, and the lamps flicker as doors open to the night breeze. The throne gleams, inviting yet daunting, its golden sheen a reminder that glamour and burden are never far apart. You think of how sitting on such a chair seems dazzling until one considers the endless decisions waiting beyond ceremony. Her footsteps echo as she ascends the platform. Each one feels deliberate, recorded by the stone beneath. She lowers herself into the throne, posture straight, gaze forward. For a moment, silence covers the hall like cloth. Then, softly, voices rise, advisors declaring loyalty, priests offering prayers, attendants speaking words rehearsed through generations. The sound is less triumphal than tidal, a gentle swell rolling against stone. History takes shape quietly, like waves gathering on a shore. The lamps continue to glow, their halos stretching across the polished floor. You imagine Cleopatra watching them, drifting between ritual words and private memory. Perhaps she recalled her father, his footsteps echoing faintly in these halls. Perhaps she felt the difference between garden laughter and this solemn rhythm. The transition is not thunderous, but tender, like stepping from one room into another. Outside, Alexandria rests beneath the stars. The harbor breathes with calm tide, lanterns flicker in courtyards, and the city dreams of voyages and markets. Merchants, scholars, and fishermen sleep, unknowing of the tremors within the palace. Their lives will not pause. They still expect bread, water, and peace. A queen's burden is carried not in grand ceremonies, but in daily continuity. Columns rise above her like ancient trees, hieroglyphs etched with stories of rulers long past. In their shadows, she sits as another name in the long procession of time. The hall feels alive with witness, heavy but not hostile. You hear the faint crackle of flames and imagine time itself crackling alongside, preserving this moment in breath rather than gesture. Cleopatra breathes and history waits. Later, when the formal voices have faded into the stone, Cleopatra retreats into quieter chambers. Here, away from priests and advisors, the atmosphere softens. She rests her palms on cool walls, feeling their grain as though they might answer the questions she does not dare voice aloud. Beyond the palace, the Nile breathes in the darkness, its hush filtering through high windows like a secret carried on air. She listens to its rhythm, steady and eternal, knowing it has outlasted countless rulers before her and will endure long after her name has been carved into history. Her thoughts drift to family, to the siblings who stand both beside her and against her, bound together in a web of loyalty and rivalry. The weight of dynasty presses heavily, more complex than any crown. In the silence, perhaps she whispers to herself questions about trust, about duty, about what it means to rule when still so young. No papyrus records such words. They vanish into shadow, belonging only to her and to the night. Even queens must sometimes ask for counsel from silence, for silence answers without judgment. The lamps burn lower as time deepens. Servants move lightly, trimming wicks so the glow endures. Their gestures are practiced, respectful, like a ritual of preservation. Cleopatra remains seated, her posture still and regal, though you sense thoughts racing beneath the calm exterior. She knows her education must accelerate now. Rituals, politics, the subtle art of listening, the sharper art of deciding. The lives of farmers, soldiers, and merchants beyond the palace depend on choices she will soon make. Yet tonight, she allows herself only to breathe, to feel the firmness of stone beneath her, the softness of fabric against her skin. Her reign begins not in thunder, but in patient, deliberate footsteps echoing into memory. The throne, when she sits upon it, offers no comfort. It is unyielding, designed not to soothe but to remind. Her fingers trace the carved arms, where sacred symbols press stories of gods and rulers into her palms. She cannot escape this legacy. She need not. Gold catches her reflection faintly, weaving her into the lineage it represents. Power is not tender, yet it waits, steady as stone. Time seems to pause. The hall breathes with expectation, while the city outside carries on indifferent beneath the stars. Cleopatra, young yet steady, balances between childhood and destiny. She burns like a quiet flame small, perhaps, but enduring her journey beginning not in storms, but in patient currents, flowing forward like the Nile itself. The throne's burden is not only its gold. Its true weight lies in silence, in expectations pressed into stone walls, and in the hunger of a people beyond palace gates. Cleopatra's first storms do not break in thunder, but tremble quietly in the earth. The Nile, once generous, falters. Its floods weaken, its current slows, and the fields along its banks grow thirsty. In Egypt, this is not a mere inconvenience. It is life itself. Famine arrives softly, yet relentlessly. Granaries thin, markets echo with scarcity, merchants speak with worry threaded through their words. Farmers lift their eyes to a sky that withholds rain. Mothers watch bowls empty faster than they can be filled. Hunger does not shout. It creeps, steady and persistent, until it lingers in every household. That silence weighs heavier than any crown. In the palace, Cleopatra listens. Advisors speak carefully, their tones bending like reeds in restless wind. Reports fall in soft cadence, harvests failing, caravans light, ships returning with holds near empty. Each word is measured, yet each strikes harder than iron. She remains still upon the throne, hands poised on carved arms, her gaze unwavering. The torches burn warm, yet the news chills the air. No scroll preserves the quiet of her private thoughts during these years. Did she fear the whispers that famine always invites, the murmurs of unrest moving like shadows along the streets? Did she feel the ache of helplessness when the Nile, sacred and eternal, offered less than before? The silence of history leaves only questions. You imagine her stepping to the window at night, gazing at the dark river, whispering to its waters like an old friend who has turned away. The Nile continues its slow movement, yet its generosity falters. Along its banks, cracked earth replaces soft mud, and seeds fail to take root. Villagers wait at the shorelines, their eyes following the currents as though willing them to rise. Fishermen return with smaller catches, their nets dragging more emptiness than silver scales. The air is filled with quiet prayers, each voice rising like incense, seeking mercy from gods who watch in silence. In the city, markets reflect the absence. Stalls that once overflowed with grain now display bowls half filled. Bread shrinks in size, though not in price. Spices still scent the air, but they cannot replace hunger. The streets grow quieter as people conserve their strength, their conversations shorter, their laughter rarer. Even the hum of Alexandria seems subdued, as though the entire city has lowered its voice. Hunger teaches silence more quickly than any tutor. Inside the palace, Cleopatra gathers her council. The long table stretches beneath the glow of oil lamps, its polished surface reflecting the anxious faces gathered around it. Maps are unrolled, figures spoken, calculations whispered. Advisors suggest borrowing from foreign lenders, taxing more heavily, cutting expenses. Each solution carries its own sting, none without consequence. Cleopatra listens, her eyes moving slowly from face to face. She nods, she questions, she pauses. You realize the throne requires patience more than answers. She orders measures meant to ease the strain, adjustments to grain distribution, appeals to trade routes, efforts to stabilize what the Nile has denied. Yet famine is stubborn. It lingers beyond decrees, beyond signatures. Policy may soften edges, But hunger seeps into corners no royal order can reach. The queen knows this. You imagine her leaving the council chamber with a measured step, her face composed, her thoughts heavier. Perhaps she allows herself a sigh only when the corridor is empty. At night, the palace rests uneasily. The gardens still hold their fragrance. The lotus still opens and closes with the sun. But the laughter of servants is quieter, their steps slower. Food served at banquets feels less abundant, though gilded dishes attempt to disguise the change. Cleopatra sits at the head of the table, her expression steady, her voice calm. She eats little, more from thought than appetite. Perhaps she wonders if eating less makes her seem in solidarity with her people, or simply hungrier at midnight. The drought tests not only the land, but also the patience of those who look to her for stability. Whispers circulate, as whispers always do. Some question her youth, her ability to govern through such hardship. Others cling to her presence, believing her calm a sign of strength. She becomes both target and anchor, a figure against whom expectations crash like waves. In silence, she must decide which voices to answer and which to let fade like echoes down a corridor. Still, she walks the palace corridors with measured grace. Attendants bow, soldiers salute, scribes lower their eyes, but all watch her quietly, gauging her steadiness. She knows that a queen must act not only with decrees, but with presence. Even when solutions are fragile, composure becomes its own kind of policy. You realize leadership is often performance, not false, but deliberate. A calm face can soothe more than a full storehouse. The city does not collapse, though it aches. The Nile will recover in time, as it always does, though those who hunger tonight do not find comfort in prophecy. Cleopatra holds steady, waiting for the river's return, waiting for fortune to tilt once more. The famine carves itself into memory, a lesson written not on papyrus, but in the lives of her people. For her, it becomes an early storm, survived not by strength alone, but by patience. And though the records remain quiet about her private thoughts, you feel the human truth beneath the silence. She was young, new to the throne, faced with scarcity instead of abundance. Perhaps she lay awake some nights, listening to the faint hum of insects outside her chamber, her mind circling endlessly. Perhaps she whispered questions into the dark, not to gods or advisors, but to herself. History records actions, not insomnia. Yet when dawn returns, she still rises, still dresses in robes of authority, still walks into the hall with composure. The lotus blossoms still float in the palace pond, opening with the sun, as though reminding her that cycles turn. Hunger will fade, the river will swell again, and patience will carry her through. The storms of her throne may be quiet, but they test her no less. In this silence, Cleopatra learns not only to reign, but to endure. You find yourself moving softly through the wide corridors of Cleopatra's palace, the sound of your footsteps absorbed by thick woven rugs that stretch endlessly. The air carries a faint perfume of myrrh, slowly curling in thin ribbons from golden censers left glowing in the corners. You hear faint notes of a lyre drifting from a distant chamber, plucked slowly, as though time itself has decided not to hurry. Someone once said the palace held secrets in every corner, and you feel it now, as if the walls lean in to listen alongside you. For a place of decisions and crowns, it hums quietly like a hive preparing for dusk. You could almost laugh, because for all the grandeur, the palace is still a workplace, only with fancier uniforms and fewer coffee breaks. The court convenes in low voices, words drifting like sails stirred by a gentle breeze. At the center sits Cleopatra, silent yet commanding, her gaze steady as if gathering reflections before choosing which to keep. Advisors bow, offering thoughts on grain, trade, and the delicate tempers of Rome. She rarely interrupts, preferring to listen, her presence weaving calm through the chamber. Historians debate whether this patience was tutored or innate, yet it hardly matters. You smile, imagining her composure less like a queen's strategy and more like someone waiting behind an endlessly hesitant customer at the bakery. The torches flicker softly, lighting up the carved stone walls where figures of gods stretch upward, painted in muted blues and ochres. In this setting, Cleopatra learns the art of silence, the power of a glance, and the timing of a single nod. In an age when words could tip the scales of kingdoms, she understands that withholding them is sometimes the greater strength. You recall that around this period, she was consolidating her authority after turbulent first years on the throne. The mystery remains, though, about who precisely guided her in diplomacy. No record names a single teacher, and perhaps that was deliberate, leaving her wisdom to appear as though born from the river itself. Of course, one could argue that the Nile itself offered better advice than some of the ministers present, who seemed skilled only in repeating each other with longer sentences. You step closer, almost feeling the cool stone beneath your palms as your fingers trace the carved lotus petals along a column. A eunuch passes by, a scroll tucked under his arm, a papyrus rustling like the faintest breeze. Around Cleopatra, advisors gather in measured circles, their voices murmuring of Roman envoys, men who will arrive with polished sandals and even more polished promises. Cleopatra does not interrupt. She listens, allowing each voice to flow into the next, as though collecting strands of thought for a tapestry only she will weave. The chamber itself seems to echo softly, a recorder of words and intentions. You smile at the scene. It feels like a modern office meeting, except here the refreshments would be figs and honey, not stale cookies. The court is not purely political. At times, faint laughter drifts through the air, born of a sharp remark or subtle jest. Cleopatra lets the corners of her mouth curve ever so slightly, never enough to disturb her composure. In these small ripples of humor, bonds take shape, loyalties are tested, and schemes form like clay awaiting fire. It is here she strengthens her rule not by thunderous command, but by nurturing a delicate web of trust. Some strands endure in history. Others vanish, their makers forgotten, like footprints erased by a tide. You cannot help but sigh at the irony. So many fight for permanence, only to fade. On certain evenings, the atmosphere shifts. Candles are replaced, musicians enter, and the chamber hums with quiet performance. Cleopatra seizes these moments as lessons. Who leans too close to the throne? Who laughs too loudly? Who slips away unnoticed? Each gesture reveals more than any report. You imagine her reclining, gaze steady, smoke curling upward, as she realizes influence is born not of volume but of silence. A stray thought flickers. If Cleopatra lived today, she would master poker effortlessly, though any casino would need grander decor to suit her. Even in these quiet chambers, the divine remains close. Statues of Isis and Hathor stand watch, their faces softened by candlelight, their presence a reminder that Egypt's rulers are never truly alone. Priests pass through at intervals, voices low, their blessings rising like warm air toward the ceiling beams. For Cleopatra, such rituals are not mere background noise, but part of the rhythm that binds her rule. To guide Egypt, one must listen to gods as attentively as to ministers. Yet questions linger. Was her devotion personal or calculated politics? Historians still argue, but you cannot help smiling at the thought that perhaps, on long evenings, she sometimes wished the priests would keep their speeches shorter. Even queens grow weary. As night deepens, shadows stretch across marble floors, lengthening like ink spilled in water. Conversations taper into murmurs, punctuated only by the shuffle of sandals or the faint swish of linen robes. In these dwindling hours, Cleopatra's education continues not in scrolls, but in subtler lessons. She watches, listens, gathers truths the way a gardener saves seeds. Each small exchange holds the potential to grow into something immense. You imagine her awareness of how delicate gestures, an offered smile, a withheld word, could ripple outward, shifting the balance of empires. And you smile yourself, because if told that centuries later, people would drift to sleep listening to her story, Cleopatra might have raised an eyebrow and remarked dryly, "At least they're quiet." The palace grows quieter still. Beyond its walls, the Nile carries moonlight downstream in slow persistence. Within, whispers overlap like faint writing on reused papyrus. Cleopatra remains composed, her breathing even, as if diplomacy has seeped into her very rhythm. Ministers retreat, their footsteps fading into distance. Alone now, she sits in lamplight, allowing thoughts to settle like dust in still air. Perhaps she weighs alliances. Perhaps she simply waits, knowing patience itself is power. For sometimes, the most royal act is to sit perfectly still, without fidgeting, while the world holds its breath. The Nile stretches before you like a mirror of sunlight, its waters carrying the sky upon wide shoulders, moving slowly, steadily, as though content to bear the weight of time itself. Along its banks, papyrus sways in the mild breeze, green stalks brushing together with the soft hush of ancient secrets. The calm seeps into your chest, a rhythm older than dynasties, older even than the pyramids. Watching its patient flow, you think that if patience ever took the form of a river, it would look exactly like this. Cleopatra often stood by these waters, her silhouette outlined in the light of late afternoon. The breeze tugged at her robes, and her eyes followed the current as if searching for the hidden roots of kingdoms within it. For Egypt, the Nile was never just a river. It was the keeper of the calendar, the measure of fortune, the throne's most faithful ally. Chroniclers record that in her years of stability, after the anguish of famine and unrest, the Nile ran generous, restoring hope across the land. Harvests swelled, granaries filled, and villages once again hummed with gentle songs. You cannot help but think of the Nile as a temperamental guest, sometimes late, sometimes moody, yet always essential. Prosperity returned to both court and countryside. Farmers pressed cattle into rich, dark soil, grain rising eagerly toward the sun. Children splashed each other along irrigation canals, their laughter echoing with the chatter of birds. Markets thrived, stalls heavy with figs, bread, honey, and wine. Alexandria's harbors bustled with ships, their sails folding like wings at rest. You picture Cleopatra moving among her people, her smile as warm as the river's glittering surface, though perhaps wishing, just once, the bows weren't quite so low. Inside the palace, the air softens. Banquets grow richer, music livelier, and debates among ministers lose their sharp edge. With urgency eased, officials allow themselves small indulgences listening to poetry recited beneath painted ceilings or watching philosophers stroll through courtyards in thoughtful silence. Cleopatra nurtures this climate of learning, welcoming scholars, healers, and mathematicians, ensuring Alexandria's name continues to shine as a beacon of knowledge. The library expands, drawing works from across distant lands, words pouring into Egypt like tributaries feeding the Nile, yet which scrolls Cleopatra herself favored remains uncertain. Historians argue endlessly, but none can prove what you read. You smile, imagining her hiding a cherished love story behind a weighty treatise on politics. A reminder that even queens may enjoy a guilty pleasure scroll now and then. Beyond the palace, the Nile dictates life's rhythm. Its bounty inspires festivals honoring Hapi, the spirit of the flood. Streets swell with music, chanting voices, and painted boats carried high in procession. Garlands of lotus crown men and women alike, gratitude lighting their faces. Cleopatra attends, her presence both sacred and reassuring. The people raise their hands to her, as though she were woven into the river's blessing itself. What did she feel in those moments? Triumph? Pressure? Records do not say. You imagine her smiling, whispering inwardly, "Beautiful indeed, but I do hope no one tips that boat." Golden calm does not mean the absence of thought. Even in times of peace, Cleopatra looks ahead. She studies alliances, weighs letters from Rome, and considers how prosperity might be used to strengthen Egypt's independence. The Nile's generosity gives her the breathing space to dream of wider horizons. You picture her seated on a balcony overlooking the gardens, the murmur of fountains beneath, her hands resting on a scroll, while her gaze lingers far beyond the palace walls. The quiet becomes her ally, giving her time to prepare for storms not yet visible. It occurs to you that calm seasons are never wasted. They are chapters of preparation written in invisible ink. Night along the Nile carries its own glow, soft and steady. The river mirrors the moon, its surface turning into rippling silver silk. Along the banks, villagers light small fires, their smoke curling upward into the quilt of stars. Musicians sit near the water, flutes sending out notes that drift across the fields, fading into the night like sighs. Cleopatra sometimes walks in her gardens during these hours, a few attendants trailing at a respectful distance. Her steps are unhurried, her face lifted toward the constellations. The stars seem to lean closer, their reflections alive in her dark eyes. On such nights, you imagine she might have felt something rare for a queen, the embrace of anonymity, the chance to stand as simply a woman beneath endless sky. Perhaps she thought, just for once, how pleasant it would be to wake without a scroll waiting for her signature. This calm offers healing after years of scarcity. Where fields once cracked and stomachs ached, now laughter carries across courtyards, and children hold baskets heavy with bread. Gratitude flows toward the throne, yet Cleopatra remains cautious. She knows such feelings are as shifting as the current. The Nile may grant abundance this year, but no crown commands its tides forever. Peace is fragile, yet precious precisely because of that. The river continues, carrying silt and stories in its patient flow. Palms bend gently along its banks, shadows stretching across the golden soil. Boats drift lazily, oars dipping in rhythm, bearing grain, traders, and dreams between villages. You watch, sensing that this balance, neither storm nor silence, is as defining of Cleopatra's reign as any battle. Egypt breathes deeply, and its queen breathes with it. And you smile, thinking, if anyone wrote a queen's job description, surely it would include part-time river watcher. At last, the day folds into dusk. The Nile darkens, but its calm remains, stretching far beyond the horizon. Cleopatra lingers by its edge, her reflection trembling gently in the water. Perhaps she wonders how long this balance will last, or perhaps she simply enjoys the beauty of the moment without questioning it. The mysteries of her heart remain her own, locked away behind her composed smile. You remain with her in this silence, letting the calm seep into your own thoughts. The golden years of the Nile hold steady, their peace a gift, their glow a reminder that even in the story of empires, there are chapters written only in light. The night settles gently over Egypt, its darkness not heavy but velvet-soft, stitched with thousands of stars. You find yourself standing near the temple walls, their massive stones glowing faintly under the silver of the moon. The air is still, holding the scent of incense and warmed stone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Nile moves quietly, but here the focus is above. The stars spill across the sky in radiant patterns, as if ancient scribes had written a text too vast to fit on papyrus. You think to yourself that reading the heavens is far more impressive than reading a scroll, and at least the stars don't smudge when your fingers get sweaty. The priests of Egypt lift their eyes upward, murmuring chants that drift like smoke into the darkness. They trace constellations with their fingers, marking the paths of Orion, Sirius, and the Great Bear, all familiar companions in the desert's eternal night. These constellations guide calendars, festivals, and rituals. To them, the stars are not distant balls of fire, but divine beacons shaping the rhythm of life. Cleopatra, too, listens to these interpretations, not dismissing them as superstition, but weaving them into her own sense of rule. For Egypt, science and spirit walk together. Astronomy and worship are threads of the same cloth. And you cannot help but grin, imagining a priest with a long beard solemnly pointing at the stars and secretly hoping no one notices he just made the pattern up on the spot. The temple walls rise around you, their carvings of gods and symbols glowing faintly in the soft light of oil lamps placed in niches. When you brush your fingers across the cool stone, you feel grooves left by chisels centuries earlier stories pressed into permanence, stone transformed into scripture. On certain nights, when the stars align with temple gateways, a shaft of light pierces the darkness, connecting earth and sky in one sacred gesture. Cleopatra must have stood in such beams, her figure framed as if the cosmos itself acknowledged her. Historians debate which sanctuary she favored. The most agree she held reverence for Isis and Hathor. Did she feel wonder, strategy, or both? You can almost hear her thinking, "At least the stars are punctual, unlike my ministers." Night deepens. Silence spreads across the courtyards, broken only by the whisper of palms beyond the walls. A priest tends a lamp, shadows leaping across the hieroglyphs like restless spirits. Cleopatra, veiled yet luminous, listens intently. She asks measured questions, never rushing. She understands that stars are more than poetry. They mark floods and harvests, Egypt's lifeblood. The priests explain Sirius heralds the Nile's rise. She nods, perhaps secretly wishing it might also foretell Rome's shifting moods. The stars have long been Egypt's timekeepers. Festivals unfold when celestial markers declare it so. The Opet festival, the mysteries of Osiris, the renewal of the year, all guided by heaven's map. Cleopatra's presence at such events strengthens her image not only as queen, but as divine participant. She is not merely attending. She is part of the pattern itself, her reign stitched into the cycles of sun and moon. The common people look up at her with devotion, as though she herself has been written into the sky. Still, the question persists. Did she believe her destiny was truly written above, or did she see the stars as useful tools for shaping loyalty? Perhaps both. And perhaps, on certain nights, she sighed, wishing destiny came with clearer instructions, like a recipe scroll. The temple roofs open wide to the heavens, great flat terraces where priests once traced the sky with ink and prayer. In your imagination, you climb the steps, stone rough beneath your sandals, until the horizon unfurls in every direction. Up here, the stars burn closer, brighter, freed from the haze of the city below. Cleopatra herself may have ascended such stairs, attendants trailing with torches whose flames seemed faint against the glittering night. She would stand motionless, her gaze lifted to constellations as priests recited names, myths, and destinies. To look into the heavens is to face eternity, and eternity offers no reply. You smile, half wondering if she too once asked which star might be hers, or whether the gods had assigned her one at all. Cleopatra's own beliefs remain shrouded. Did she trust the patterns of the sky, or treat them as another instrument of rule, mirroring the faith of her people? Some sources call her devout, others calculating, her rituals performed with careful intent. What is certain is her mastery of appearances, aligning herself with Isis, embodying divinity through symbol as much as through rule. The temple stones seem to echo this dual truth, devotion and strategy bound together. You cannot help but imagine her smiling slyly. The stars made me do it. The night stretches on. Beyond the temple, the desert breathes cold air across the sands. Inside, the lamps burn lower, their light dimming but steady. You sit within this moment, feeling the weight of history settle like a blanket. The stars above continue their endless march, uncaring for crowns or empires, yet intimately tied to both. Cleopatra remains within this balance, a figure both mortal and divine, both ruler and seeker. She listens to the whispers of priests, to the silence of the heavens, and perhaps to our own doubts. But doubt has no place in official records. It lingers only in the spaces between words, in the unspoken corners of memory. You lean into the silence, realizing that sometimes the most profound truths are written not on stone or papyrus, but in the gaps between stars. When dawn approaches, the stars fade slowly, their brilliance dimming as if reluctant to leave. The temple walls glow once more with the blush of morning, and the chants give way to birdsong. Cleopatra descends from the temple's heights, her steps calm, her presence collected. The world awakens to ordinary tasks, but she carries with her the memory of the night's vastness, the silent company of constellations. You remain for a moment longer, watching the last star vanish. And you think to yourself, history may remember battles and treaties, but somewhere above those stories, the stars still shine patient, steady, waiting for another queen, another dreamer to look up and wonder. The palace is quiet, though tension hums beneath its marble floors. You walk through wide halls lit with oil lamps, their flames steady but nervous, as though even fire waits for what will unfold. Outside, Alexandria stirs with rumors. A Ramon. General has arrived, a man whose name carries the weight of continents. His reputation precedes him victorious, brilliant, dangerous. Julius Caesar has stepped into Egypt, and the currents of power shift like tides beneath the moon. You breathe slowly, sensing that this meeting will ripple far beyond these walls. And you can't help but think, if history were a play, tonight is when the audience leans forward in their seats. Cleopatra knows the stakes. Egypt is not only a kingdom but a prize, and her rivalry with her brother Ptolemy XIII has already carved fractures into the throne. Exile had pressed her near the desert's edge, where survival itself was uncertain. Yet fortune shifts with the arrival of Julius Caesar, Rome's most formidable man. His presence is no accident, it is destiny intruding. The question is not whether he will choose sides, but whether she can make herself the inevitable choice. With a restless mind and a fearless heart, Cleopatra prepares her move. Perhaps she even smiles at the thought. Would Rome expect her to bow, or dazzle, or both? The story most often retold is almost theatrical. Denied entry to Caesar's guarded quarters, Cleopatra devises a plan as bold as it is unconventional. She orders herself wrapped tightly, some say in a carpet, others in a linen sack, and smuggled past suspicious soldiers. When at last she is unrolled at Caesar's feet, she does not appear defeated but radiant, her eyes alive with determination. Historians argue over the details. Was it true or embroidered by later storytellers? Yet one fact endures. Her entrance was unforgettable. You picture Caesar blinking in disbelief, then laughing, then recognizing that he faced someone whose wit equaled her audacity. You cannot help but chuckle. It must have been the most dramatic unwrapping in history. What followed in that chamber is lost to time. No scroll preserves her first words, nor his. Perhaps she spoke softly, commanding attention without force. Perhaps silence was her weapon, letting presence speak first. Caesar, hardened by war, may have been disarmed not by beauty, but by brilliance, sharp as steel. Was it strategy, charm, or fate that bound them? Likely all three. Or perhaps Caesar simply thought, this woman knows how to make an entrance. She will be trouble. The palace air grows heavy with whispers. Courtiers murmur of the queen's boldness, of Caesar's amusement, of what alliance may emerge. To some, scandal simmers. To others, salvation gleams. Cleopatra's enemies tighten their grip, fearful that her partnership with Caesar will cement her rule. Outside, the people of Alexandria wonder how their lives will shift under Roman eyes. Inside, Cleopatra holds her ground, conversing with a man who has crossed seas and toppled kings. The symmetry is striking. One rules Egypt by inheritance. The other commands Rome by conquest. They meet not as opposites, but as reflections, two figures who understand that power is as much theater as it is force. And you cannot help but grin, imagining the awkward silence if either of them had sneezed during the grand introductions. Caesar is not without his own needs. Rome's treasury strains, his reputation weaves between admiration and suspicion. Egypt's wealth, its grain, its position along trade routes, all glitter before him as solutions. Cleopatra offers more than resources. She offers partnership cloaked in charm, loyalty veiled in intimacy. She is younger by decades, but age matters little when ambition burns with equal flame. What historians cannot decide is whether Caesar saw her first as ally or as lover. Perhaps the distinction was irrelevant, for in Cleopatra's presence, both roles became inseparable. And maybe, just maybe, he thought, here is someone who negotiates with her eyes as much as her words. The city watches. At dawn, Caesar appears at court with Cleopatra beside him, her figure graceful, her gaze unwavering. Ptolemy XIII, young and furious, protests, but Caesar silences him with Roman authority. The balance tilts at once. The queen is restored to power, shielded by Rome's embrace. For Alexandria, the sight is both relief and unease. Relief at the return of stability, unease at the growing shadow of Roman influence. Yet Cleopatra stands tall, her alliance secured not by pleading, but by performance. You think of it now and almost laugh because in truth, history often turns on moments that look suspiciously like stage plays. And yet, behind the spectacle, Cleopatra remains enigmatic. Did she trust Caesar fully, or merely ride the current of opportunity? Did affection stir in her heart, or was it all calculation? The records are silent. Roman historians, fond of their own drama, describe her as enchanting, cunning, irresistible. Egyptian accounts, fragmentary, but proud, frame her as wise, favored by the gods. Between these portrayals lies the silence of her own voice, lost to time. You strain to hear it, but all you can catch is a whisper carried on the wind, elusive as starlight. And you think, perhaps that is her greatest triumph remaining, mysterious even when history tries to pin her down. Night returns to the palace. Cleopatra sits by a window, the glow of lamps flickering against her face. Caesar speaks of Rome, of battles, of debts, his voice steady, practiced. She listens, absorbing every detail, her mind calculating futures in which Egypt survives, thrives, resists. The alliance is not mere romance, it is survival etched into strategy. You linger in this quiet scene, watching two figures framed by shadows, their conversation weaving the fabric of empires. And you smile softly, because in moments like this, history does not roar, it whispers. The meeting has ended, but its echoes have only begun. From this night, new chapters unfurl. Wars, journeys, children, betrayals, and dreams larger than borders. The carpet's unrolling may be myth, but its meaning is truth. Cleopatra entered history not quietly, but boldly, with eyes open and future unshaken. You remain in the hall, listening to the silence after their voices fade, aware that you have witnessed not only a meeting of two rulers, but the spark of a story the world will never forget. The palace settles into stillness after the day's commotion. Servants move like shadows through corridors, their steps hushed on marble floors worn smooth by generations. Torches are dimmed, replaced by candles resting in bronze holders. There, glow trembles against the walls, unsteady yet persistent, like secrets trying to remain hidden but failing. Each footfall you make seems to echo faintly, as if even stone wishes to overhear what comes next. The silence is not hollow. It carries a pulse, a waiting. You smile to yourself, wondering whether walls ever grow curious when history pauses. To breathe. In a chamber nearby, The arrangement is intentional. Candles circle a low table where maps and scrolls sprawl, their edges curling in the warmth. Wax drips in slender streams, freezing into golden rivulets. Cleopatra sits close, her face divided between shadow and flame. She studies borders and roots, her hand drifting across the parchment, her mind sharp despite the hour. Caesar sits across from her, speaking in Latin, his tone quiet, measured. Their voices mingle, steady but subdued, as though they too know. Power is shaped not only on battlefields, but also in moments like this. You grin inwardly, imagining that more than one empire was nearly undone by stubborn wax stains. The air here smells of oil, beeswax, and faint smoke. Beyond the palace, the Nile exhales cool mist, yet this room holds its own heat, heavy with thought. From where you linger, leaning against a column, you sense the queen's intent. Cleopatra does not merely follow events. She bends them, reshapes them, weaves them into patterns. She asks questions that cut deeper than appearances. Caesar answers with patience, though sometimes his gaze strays from maps to her. And you almost laugh, because clearly, even for conquerors, geography can wait. Servants pass quietly through the halls, setting fresh candles where wax has dwindled. Their faces remain expressionless, but their eyes flicker with awareness. They know these nights are not ordinary. Power is being decided above their heads, yet they witness it only in small gestures, the way Cleopatra's hand moves across a map, the way Caesar leans closer to listen, the way silence thickens after a phrase heavy with implication. For them, history becomes routine work, carrying trays, trimming wicks, replacing lamps. You imagine one servant, bored and weary, thinking, future scholars will write about this moment, and I'll be remembered only as the guy who fetched the water. There is intimacy in these halls, but not the intimacy of romance alone. It is the closeness of shared focus, of minds leaning toward the same flame. Cleopatra's voice lowers, becoming almost a murmur. She speaks of Egypt's temples, its gods, its wealth drawn from the Nile's gifts. Caesar listens, nods, calculates how such abundance might steady his own unstable Rome. Yet somewhere between strategy and survival, something gentler flickers, unspoken. Perhaps admiration, perhaps curiosity, perhaps simply the recognition that here is someone who understands that power requires both steel and silk. And you think, with a small smile, that candlelight has always been a poor accomplice to secrecy. Makes every glance visible. The palace itself deepens the quiet. High ceilings capture candlelight, sending restless shadows climbing across painted walls. Lotus-carved columns rise like patient guardians. In such silence, even the faint rustle of papyrus carries the weight of thunder. Cleopatra pauses, lifting her eyes from the maps toward the shuttered window. Beyond, stars press their glow against the glass, insistent yet distant. Her face betrays nothing. Does she see prophecy there, or only fatigue? It is impossible to know. Mystery wraps her like a second garment, perhaps never more tightly than in these still hours. You sigh, imagining how maddening it must have been to serve beside her, forever guessing. Never certain dot in time, the maps are nudged aside, and the chamber softens into deeper quiet. Caesar speaks of Rome, its senate, rivalries, betrayals. Cleopatra listens closely, aware that Egypt's survival is bound to that republic's tides. Candlelight smooths the iron from his features, yet she remembers the steel beneath. He is both shield and blade. Her replies come measured, her words chosen as carefully as jewels set in gold. And you can't help but smile diplomacy after. All is little more than paranoia dressed in elegance, not the hours pass. Candles burn lower, their flames shrinking, their wax pooling thick at the base. The palace seems to exhale, as though relieved that the night is nearly done. Cleopatra rises, her silhouette long against the wall, her bracelets catching the final gleam of firelight. She speaks a last phrase to Caesar, something soft, and leaves the hall with steps measured and calm. The echo of her departure lingers longer than the sound itself, as though the stone refuses to let her go. Caesar remains, gazing at the table, perhaps wondering if he has met not only a queen, but an equal. And you almost laugh, because even Rome's greatest general looks like a man left pondering whether he just lost an argument he thought he'd won. Now the hall is nearly dark. Only a few candles remain, their flames fragile, their smoke curling upward in thin threads. You sit within the quiet, feeling the weight of what has passed. These halls have seen countless rulers, countless whispers, but tonight's glow belongs to Cleopatra and Caesar. No chronicler can fully capture what their words carried, what their silences meant. What is recorded are treaties, children, battles. What is lost are these hours of softness, the way candlelight touched ambition, the way silence held more meaning than speeches. You breathe slowly, realizing that sometimes history is not made in daylight. With trumpets and crowds, it is made. Here, in the hush of palace halls, with wax in flame and two voices echoing low. When the last candle dies, the hall surrenders to darkness. The night belongs once more to silence, but the memory of its light lingers. You remain, watching the smoke drift upward until it vanishes. And you think to yourself, power may roar in public squares, but it learns to whisper in candlelit halls. Cleopatra knew this. Caesar learned it. And you, here now, can almost hear the faintest trace of their voices soft, steady, weaving empires from shadows and flame. The palace gardens breathe with a softness that only night can summon. Lotus blossoms float lazily on the surface of a still pond, their petals folding in upon themselves as though guarding dreams. The air hums gently with the song of crickets, broken now and then by the ripple of water when a fish stirs below. You walk the stone paths slowly, the hush of sandals against the earth blending with the garden's natural rhythm. Above, the moon bends low, spilling its silver over the leaves, making each blade of grass gleam as though painted by hand. Here, time loosens its grip. You feel as if the world itself exhales, inviting you to linger. Cleopatra often seeks this. Garden when the palace grows too heavy with voices, arguments, and the weight of command. Here, among lotus and stone, she finds what the throne room never offers: quiet, patience, and the comfort of things that bloom without decree. Tonight, she sits by the water's edge, her reflection wavering in silver ripples. Her posture is serene, her hands resting loosely in her lap. Yet her gaze drifts far beyond the pond, beyond even these walls, toward horizons unseen. She is queen still, yet here she seems more like a soul confiding in the night. And you smile at the thought. Power may thunder in council chambers, but in gardens it lowers to a whisper, carried only by leaves. The fountain draws your ear, water streaming from the carved mouth of a lion into the basin with a rhythm steady as breath. Caesar sits nearby, his features softened by flickering lantern light. In the council hall he is sharp, deliberate, every word edged with command. Yet here, in the company of jasmine and water, the iron eases. His voice lowers, as though afraid to disturb the blossoms. At times he leans toward Cleopatra, speaking less with words than with presence. Silence gathers between them, rich and deliberate, even the crickets hesitant to intrude. And you cannot help but laugh quietly, realizing that even histories, giants need a small, quiet garden to remember they are human. It is in this stillness that something new stirs, not merely political alliance or shared ambition, but life itself. Cleopatra's hand rests lightly against her belly, almost unconsciously. The gesture is small, easily overlooked, yet it carries the gravity of entire empires. Caesarion, though not yet born, is already a presence here, hidden within the hush of lotus blossoms and moonlight. The garden becomes more than a retreat, it becomes a cradle for what will come. You find yourself wondering at the mystery of beginnings, how the fate of nations can hinge on something so fragile, so silent. And you cannot help but smile at the thought that all the maps and treaties pale beside the quiet miracle of a heartbeat. Not yet heard, servants pass through from time to time, trays of figs balanced carefully, pitchers of cool water gleaming in the lantern glow. Their steps are trained to silence, their eyes lowered. None dare linger in this sanctuary, yet even in their brevity they sense the weight of the moment. One pauses to trim a lantern wick, steadying the flame. For the briefest instant his gaze lifts, sketching Cleopatra's softened profile, lit. Like a figure from a dream before, he retreats quickly into shadow. Later, in the servants' quarters, he might whisper, "I saw something tonight, something rare, something gentle." And you smile faintly, because even in whispers, mystery grows. The garden deepens with night. Scents sharpen the sweetness of lotus, the damp breath of earth, the spice of jasmine riding the breeze. Caesar speaks of Rome, of order and future. Cleopatra listens, still and composed, her eyes reflective, as if weighing more than his words. Within her rests a child destined for two worlds, perhaps belonging fully to neither. Caesarean little Caesar already entangled in politics before. Breath touches his lungs. Will he inherit Egypt's throne? Or Rome's suspicion? Or only the burden of being born beneath too much light? The questions drift like shadows among the blossoms, unanswered. That is the garden's mercy. It offers space for wondering, not certainty. You wander nearer the pond. Moonlight ripples in its surface, breaking where fish rise in gentle circles. Each disturbance swells, then smooths again. It feels like an omen, though its meaning escapes you. Life stirs, vanishes, and leaves the water calm once more. So too will Caesarean's existence send ripples into history, lasting or fading. None here can know. Scholars centuries later will argue, certain of truths. But the garden keeps its silence. Mystery, after all, was always part of its design. Cleopatra rises at last, her figure long against the lantern glow. She walks slowly along the garden path, trailing her fingertips across the broad lotus leaves, as if drawing steadiness from their silent strength. Caesar follows, a step behind, his eyes lingering not on the blossoms, but on her hand, her composure. The two move deeper into the garden, where air cools, shadows thicken, and the night itself seems to hold its breath. Even the crickets grow hushed, as though paying respect to the intimacy unfolding in their midst. In this sanctuary of stone and water, the future waits quietly, balanced between two heartbeats. They pause beneath a pergola woven with jasmine, blossoms pale against the darkness. Here, silence speaks louder than words. The flowers, the stones, the pool at their feet, all will outlast them, carrying whispers long after voices fade. A child will come, empires will tremble, Rome's shadow will grow, but not tonight. Tonight belongs to the hush of petals, the cool of water, the fragrance that clings even when the flowers fall. You breathe in deeply, and it feels like eternity, not endless years, but a single night perfectly suspended. Lanterns sink low, flames bending into amber arcs. At last, Cleopatra and Caesar turn back toward the palace, their steps unhurried, their voices barely more than murmurs. The garden exhales, reclaiming its solitude. The pond ripples once and stills again. You linger, reluctant to leave, aware. You have witnessed something more enduring than conquest, the meeting of love and history, the quiet beginning of a life that will shape destinies. As you step away, you glance back at the lotus pond. Its blossoms, folded tightly in sleep, keep their secret safe. Stone streets stretch ahead, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, their surfaces cool beneath the falling dusk. Rome greets not with spectacle, but with a quiet dignity. In the Forum, shadows climb marble columns, settling into the carved lines of history. From nearby gardens, the scent of rosemary, thyme, and sage drifts on the breeze. Not incense, not oils, but the fragrance of soil, plain and enduring. You draw it in and sense the difference. Where the Nile murmurs in mystery, Rome speaks in calm restraint. Cleopatra walks softly across the stones, her robe brushing like silk against earth. The Egyptians beside her glance upward at temples that rise severe and solemn, awe and unease written in their eyes. This is a city of discipline, its memory carved into stone. Caesar walks at her side, the crowd's murmurs spreading like ripples. Citizens pause, watching, whispering the queen's name. In their tongue it shortens, clipped, losing its fluid grace. Yet even reshaped, her presence alters the air, bending the space she enters. The Tiber glimmers in twilight, its surface restless. Quick, never still. Unlike the wide, eternal Nile, this river hurries forward as though Rome itself cannot abide delay. Bridges cross its waters in graceful arcs, their reflections bending into silver crescents. You pause on one, leaning over the stone edge, watching. The shimmer below. A thought drifts to you. Rivers mirror their people. The Nile is patient, unhurried, timeless. The Tiber, urgent, unyielding. And now Cleopatra's life is threaded between them, her destiny pulled by both currents. The villa, set aside for her, lies apart from the Forum's turmoil, behind cypress and olive walls. Its gardens glow with lantern light, flames golden and steady against the dark. Inside, cool stone muffles sound. Footsteps vanish into the hush. Servants bring figs, bread, watered wine, yet Cleopatra hardly touches them. She moves instead among rosemary and laurel, her hand brushing leaves, her eyes lingering in shadows, as if searching for something Rome has yet to reveal. Caesar often finds her here. Their voices stay low, carried no further than the fountain's dripping cadence. He speaks of Senate quarrels, jealous rivals, dangers wrapped in courtesy. Cleopatra listens, though part of her heart drifts across the sea to Caesarion, her child in Egypt. Rome does not yet know his name. Perhaps it never will. And in that secrecy lies both shield and peril. The days pass. Cleopatra sees the city not as a tourist, but as one moving beneath its surface. She watches the way senators walk with measured steps, their faces carved into masks of composure. She notices how the people cluster in markets, their laughter softer, less exuberant than in Alexandria. She learns that Rome values gravity, a kind of restraint woven into every gesture. And yet she also senses cracks, whispers in shaded corners, glances too sharp, conversations cut short when others draw near. It is a city alive with secrets, each hidden beneath the smooth surface of its stones. The villa's garden becomes her sanctuary. She returns to it often, especially at dusk, when the sky softens into rose and violet. The herbs release their fragrance more fully in the cooling air, wrapping her in a veil of scent. Lanterns are lit, their flames flickering against stone walls. The fountain's water glimmers, casting ripples of light across the leaves. Cleopatra walks slowly here, her steps unhurried, as though she has found in Rome a place where time bends, just enough to allow stillness. Caesar comes and goes, summoned by affairs of state, but the garden remains constant. Holding her secrets gently, you linger in the garden paths, where the evening wind stirs leaves with a soft murmur. Beyond the walls, a faint clink of armor carries from the streets where soldiers patrol. Yet here, the world feels muted, gentler, as though empire itself has paused to breathe. You realize the paradox. Even at the heart of power, there must be spaces of tenderness, hidden like chambers within the body of a giant. Still, mystery threads through the calm. Where exactly did Cleopatra dwell during her stay in Rome? Scholars dispute, ruins shift, scrolls fade. Some claim one villa, others another. The truth dissolves into shadows, as if the city itself conspired to guard her in fragments. You understand. Then, absence is also a story. What remains unseen may echo longer than what survives. One moonlit night, she stands by the fountain, its waters silvered beneath the cypress trees. Caesar approaches quietly, the weight of Senate and soldiers etched into his stance. Cleopatra does not rush to fill the silence. She lets it surround them, steady as breath. He exhales, shoulders easing, as if the garden alone permits his burdens to rest. Near yet not touching, they share a stillness more binding than speeches in the forum. Later, when he leaves, Cleopatra remains. She lifts a sprig of rosemary, pressing it between her fingers, breathing in its sharp, clean scent. You sense her thoughts turning inward toward the Nile, toward her son, toward futures too tangled to unravel. She whispers something then, words too soft to catch. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a secret. The garden swallows it gently, tucking it into the folds of night. You sit at the fountain's edge, the stone cool beneath your palms. The water moves steadily, never hurried, never still. You realize that gardens, whether in Alexandria or Rome, carry the same truth. They are places where history loosens its armor, where questions can linger without need of answers. Cleopatra's story here will blur into mystery, her footsteps hidden beneath centuries of dust. Yet for now, in this hour, she is simply a woman in a quiet garden, breathing among herbs and shadows, held by Rome's gentle embrace. And as the night deepens, you let the calm seep into you. The city beyond continues, torches flare, voices rise and fall, but here, in this walled sanctuary, time slows to a whisper. You rise at last, following the paths back toward the villa, carrying with you the memory of stone warmed by day, of herbs releasing their secrets into the night, and of a queen who walked softly through Rome, leaving behind mysteries the city has yet to surrender. The city is quieter than you expect, though the sun rises over familiar rooftops and marble columns. Rome has not stopped moving, but a certain hush drifts through its streets, a shadow that refuses to settle fully. Merchants open stalls more, slowly, their hands trembling slightly as they arrange figs, olives, and bread. The Tiber flows as usual, unmindful of history's weight, carrying gentle ripples toward the sea. You walk alongside its banks, feeling how the city's rhythm has shifted, slowed, as though even stone and water have noticed something missing. Julius Caesar is gone. The Ides of March have passed, leaving only the quiet aftermath. No trumpet sounds, no soldiers marching through the forum. Instead, whispers drift across the marble squares. Speculation, fear, wonder. Senators linger in shadowed corridors, their voices low, cutting between the stones like blades of cautious wind. Some speak in relief, others in grief. You cannot discern which dominates. And yet the streets themselves seem to mourn, as though the sun lingers longer on the buildings, casting elongated shadows that stretch across cobblestones. You almost chuckle softly at the thought that even light can be conspiring to dramatize a city's silence. The Senate, once alive with voices, now lies hollow. Marble benches sit cold, the podium abandoned, its air still heavy with arguments that will never sound the same again. You imagine the echoes of Caesar lingering, like faint smoke that refuses to vanish. His final words remain uncertain. Et tu, brute? Some insist, while others argue, he spoke nothing at all, or something lost in the swell of chaos. The truth, hidden in silence, drifts forever out of reach. And as you stand in the emptiness, You feel that uncertainty brushing past. Like an unseen wind intangible, yet undeniably real. Beyond, the streets whisper their own subdued tale. Curtains are drawn tight. Footsteps quicken but soften. Conversations retreat indoors. Merchants glance sideways before speaking, their caution louder than any cry. Even the creak of cartwheels over stone sounds hushed, as though the city itself has agreed to lower its voice. There is no riot, no fire, only a quiet suspension, as if Rome itself waits for release. You pause at the Tiber's edge, leaning into the cool stone of a bridge. The river flows steady, indifferent to rulers and daggers. Its rhythm offers comfort. Life continues. Even when history stumbles. Cleopatra is far from Rome now, yet her presence lingers in your mind. She has heard of Caesar's passing, no doubt, through messengers careful to speak in measured tones. You can imagine her thoughts: sorrow tempered by calculation, grief softened by foresight. Rome will not pause for mourning alone. Empire marches onward. Perhaps she feels the absence of his counsel already, a stillness left in the chambers where decisions were once shared. Yet she knows that every shadow, every silence, offers an opportunity to listen, to observe, to act. And you almost smile at the thought that even grief can be tactical, if approached quietly. In the Forum, statues catch the sun's early light, their faces frozen in serene expression. They seem oblivious to politics, oblivious to history, yet somehow, in their permanence, they mark the moment. You walk past one, noticing the way the shadow of its arm stretches over the stone beneath, pointing not to a direction, but to a feeling, a stillness tinged with uncertainty. The people pass by with careful steps, their eyes flicking to the statue before returning to the ground, avoiding direct confrontation with the emptiness left behind. And you think, softly, that sometimes monuments are not reminders of glory, but of the quiet that follows great noise. At the palace, rooms are dim. Candles burn lower than usual, their flames steady but subdued. Messengers move through halls with muted steps, carrying letters whose words weigh heavily upon the inked paper. You imagine conversations held in the shadows. What now? What becomes of Rome? The answers are not clear. Some speak of order restored through Octavian and Antony. Some speak of chaos inevitable. The weight of potential futures hangs over each corridor, invisible but palpable. You lean against a wall, feeling its cool stone press lightly against your palm, and consider how silence can sometimes be louder than any declaration. The gardens of Rome, usually lively with voices and color, seem muted now. Fountains continue their steady murmur, water catching the slant of morning light, glimmering as though untouched by grief. Birds circle overhead, their call softer, subdued by the hush below. Along the paths, rosemary and thyme release their fragrance, sharp and grounding, reminding you that even amid loss, the world breathes on. Death alters human rhythm, yet life refuses to pause. Cleopatra, had she walked here, might have felt the same, that existence flows forward, indifferent to sorrow, yet willing to hold space for it. You feel kinship with the unseen observer of these gardens, both of you witnesses to a city balanced uneasily between what has ended and what is. Yet to come. By midday, shadows grow long, folding themselves beneath marble colonnades. Citizens pass with measured caution, their pace subdued, their voices hushed. Rome has not collapsed, yet it no longer moves with unshaken confidence. Its rhythm slows, its certainty fractured. Every step you take, leather striking stone, breath drawn into cool air feels heavier, more deliberate, as if even the act of walking now carries the burden of history. At a fountain, your gaze lingers on rippling water. The surface fractures your reflection into shifting pieces, reminding you how truth bends with perspective, how memory alters depending on the eyes that behold it. And you wonder what Caesar might have glimpsed had he stopped here one last time, whether he would have recognized the shadows gathering beyond his reach dot as evening falls. Torches awaken along the avenues, flames bending but unbroken against the still air. By the Tiber, their light scatters into threads of gold across the restless current. You pause upon a bridge, listening to the steady murmur of water beneath stone, sensing the weight of a city suspended between past and future. Silence thickens, yet within it lies its own authority. Absence teaches that power falters, that memory reshapes itself in darkness. Rome breathes on, unsettled, enduring. The air carries a quiet sweetness as you approach the banks of the Kidnus. The river moves with a gentle, deliberate rhythm, reflecting the soft gold of a late afternoon sun. Small waves lap lazily at the edges of the shore, and the reeds sway in a slow, measured dance with the breeze. You step lightly along the path that follows the river, noticing how the soft wind carries scents of wildflowers and distant spices. Even the air seems to hush here, as though waiting for something or someone to arrive. Cleopatra's boat lies moored just beyond the riverbank, its hull painted in muted reds and golds that gleam faintly in the light. The canopy above the deck ripples with the wind, revealing glimpses of silk curtains tied back with delicate cords. The scent of incense wafts from within, mingling with the earthy aroma of water and stone. You imagine stepping aboard, feeling the soft sway beneath your feet, the gentle murmur of water against the sides. This is a place where movement is slowed, where every gesture carries weight and intention. And you can't help but grin at the thought that even an empire-building queen enjoys a river breeze now and then. Mark Antony stands at the bow, his posture relaxed yet commanding. He watches the river with a thoughtful gaze, as if reading it like a map, each ripple and current telling stories hidden to most eyes. Cleopatra approaches quietly, her sandals brushing the planks in soft rhythm. She pauses to gaze over the water, her reflection mirrored in the gentle waves. The light strikes her hair, making it glow faintly, and you notice how even the wind seems to favor her, teasing strands softly across her face. The river, the boat, the breeze, they all conspire to create a world set apart from the usual rhythm. Of courts and city streets, their voices drift softly across the deck, light as petals carried on a breeze. Antony's tone is low, steady, grounding, while Cleopatra's carries a measured elegance, curiosity woven into every word. Their conversation flows like the river itself, alliances considered, strategies whispered, reflections on power and trust. Yet beneath the words lies something quieter, unspoken yet undeniable. The intimacy of two minds meeting without urgency, their presence together more binding than any decree proclaimed in the Senate dot around them. The river moves with secrets of its own. Stones, smoothed by centuries of current, glimmer just beneath the surface. Birds circle high, their shadows brushing the water before vanishing into the horizon. Near the hull, silver fish dart in and out of the sunlight, quick flashes of life. Beneath the stillness, Cleopatra runs her fingers along the railing, tracing the wood's grain, as though anchoring herself to the moment. You realize that history lives not only in battles, but in the quiet grace of such fleeting, attentive silences. The boat glides steadily along the Kidnus, its oars dipping in quiet rhythm. Antony gestures toward the hills rising in the distance, their slopes burnished with the last light of day. Cleopatra leans slightly toward him, her face contemplative, as though she reads not only the land, but the possibilities hidden within it. Their laughter drifts briefly into the air, mingling with the lap of water, the sound dissolving into the evening. Time loosens here, urgency dissolves, and all that remains is the rhythm of river and breath, presence and awareness dot as the sun sinks lower. Lanterns spark to life, their glow catching the current in streaks of molten gold. The boat becomes a floating sanctuary, luminous against the gathering dusk. Cleopatra moves slowly along the deck, her fingers brushing the railing, feeling the lantern's warmth against the cool hush of river air. Antony follows at her side, their closeness unspoken, their silence charged. Shadows stretch and fold across the planks, shifting like woven patterns, as if the river itself wove them into the scene. From the banks drifts the mingled fragrance of damp soil, jasmine in bloom, and crushed herbs beneath unseen feet. Cleopatra lowers her hand into the passing water, letting the cool current slip between her fingers. Antony watches, his gaze steady, as though he recognizes the depth carried in so small a gesture. Their exchange is quiet, but weighted in understanding. Without words, you sense that history is not only declared in forums or battles, but whispered here, in shared stillness. The evening deepens, colors dissolving into violet and indigo as the sky exhales its final light. Lanterns glow along the deck, their flames trembling with the breeze, as though breathing in rhythm with the river. Cleopatra moves toward the center, her gaze stretching across the darkening water, where the river twists through the hushed landscape. Antony follows, his step instinctive, their shoulders nearly brushing in intimacy too subtle to claim openly, yet undeniable in its presence. The surface of the river mirrors the heavens, the trees, and these two figures, caught between command and vulnerability, their outlines etched into a moment that feels lifted from time itself. Around the boat, the smallest movements whisper. Significance, reeds glancing against the hull, a bird's fleeting dive sending ripples outward, the current folding light into shifting patterns. Cleopatra tilts her head slightly, eyes following the river's course as though it carried messages only she could read. Antony mirrors her focus, their shared stillness weaving a bond beyond speech. Observation itself becomes communion in understanding that the river teaches more than words ever could. Above, stars kindle one by one, scattering reflections that flicker across the moving surface. Cleopatra's voice, soft as breath, rises into the night air. A thought, perhaps a vision, private yet profound. Antony listens with unbroken attention, the river's murmur and the boat's gentle creak framing their exchange with a rhythm, both fragile and eternal. You sense the immensity hidden within such quiet gestures, the way they ripple forward into centuries unseen. At last, night settles fully. The lanterns remain, their golden circles softening the world into intimacy. Cleopatra steps to the bow, Antony beside her, watching the current drift onward. Wrapped in silence, you feel the hush enfold you, a lesson in patience, presence, and the fleeting grace of simply being. The streets of Antioch breathe quietly as evening settles. Lanterns hang from wrought iron brackets, their flames flickering gently in the night air, casting long, wavering shadows across stone walls. The scent of olive trees and warm spices drifts from nearby gardens, mingling with the faint hum of the river that winds through the city. You walk slowly along the cobbled streets, each step echoing softly, and notice how even the most ordinary corners seem to hold stories. Every stone, every arch, seems touched by history, whispering secrets that only the quiet can reveal. Cleopatra moves through the streets with a grace that sets her apart from the city's quiet rhythm. Her presence does not demand attention, yet it cannot be overlooked, like moonlight shimmering across still water. Citizens glance as she passes, their eyes caught between curiosity and reverence. She walks without display, attuned instead to the subtle details of life unfolding around her. Beside her, Antony matches her pace, his steps steady, protective. In their restraint, together, they move not as rulers parading authority, but as quiet observers within a city softened by dusk. Lanterns lead the way into a secluded courtyard, where fountains murmur softly in the gathering night. Firelight glimmers across mossy stones, sending ripples of gold across the surface. Cleopatra lingers, watching the shifting reflections as though reading patterns hidden in the water. Antony remains close, his voice low, offering gentle words about the city's rhythm. Their exchange feels less like discourse and more like meditation, a rare pause before history resumes its demands. Music drifts faintly through the alleys, the notes of a lyre carried by the soft night air. You imagine musicians hidden behind doorways or under awnings, their fingers coaxing melodies that weave with the distant murmur of the river. The sound is subtle, almost shy, yet it touches everything: the cobblestones, the lanterns, the leaves of olive trees. Cleopatra's eyes brighten slightly at the sound, her lips curving in a small, private smile. Antony notices, his expression softening. You recognize the quiet intimacy and shared appreciation, a bond formed not through words, but through attention and presence. The city's architecture is both grand and intimate. Arches frame small courtyards, while mosaics glimmer faintly under. The lanterns. You can see patterns of life repeated in the designs. Olive branches, stars, rippling water, each symbol a reminder of both nature and culture. Cleopatra pauses to touch a mosaic, her fingertips brushing against the smooth stones. She traces the shapes slowly, deliberately, as though connecting with layers of history beneath the surface. Antony watches, appreciating the reverence in her movement. You sense the reverence yourself, feeling the city's past fold into the present, quiet and unhurried. Dinner is served in a secluded garden, hidden behind high walls that shield it from the streets. The tables are set with simple elegance: fruits, olives, bread, and wine. Lanterns are scattered throughout the space, their soft light warming the stone and reflecting off polished silver. You notice the subtle interplay of shadow and flame, each movement of hand or gesture altering the patterns across the courtyard. Cleopatra eats slowly, savoring both the flavors and the moment. Antony speaks occasionally, always gentle, his words measured. Laughter comes quietly, like a ripple of water, never loud, never urgent. Here, the world feels suspended, and you understand that luxury is not always in wealth or spectacle, but in the deliberate slowing of time got after dinner. They wander deeper. Into the garden, past flowering vines and fountains whose water sings as it falls. Lanterns illuminate the paths intermittently, leaving pockets of darkness where only the stars provide guidance. The night air is cool, carrying scents of jasmine and rosemary, with a hint of the river drifting from afar. You walk alongside them, noticing how the night stretches and elongates shadows, creating spaces that feel secret, private, removed from the pressures of empires. Every step is deliberate, every glance measured, as if the world itself has paused. To observe this quiet companionship, the moon climbs higher, its silver light spilling across Antioch's courtyards. Cleopatra pauses by a low wall, tilting her gaze upward. Stars shimmer faintly above, their glow mirrored in the quiet fountain. At her side, for a moment, her eyes seem to hold both heavens and water. Antony lingers close, his presence steady, unspoken. Between them stretches no claim of possession, only a shared stillness, an understanding of proximity and trust. Here, the weight of kingdoms and politics recedes, softened into distant echoes. Tonight belongs only to the garden, the night air, and the rhythm of two figures moving gently within a city that sleeps with one ear open. Side paths reveal small courtyards, each carrying its own quiet life. Musicians pluck at strings in half-hidden alcoves, their melodies low and unhurried. From unseen ovens comes the faint, warm scent of bread. Lanterns glow at measured intervals, guiding steps without banishing the tender dark. Cleopatra stops at one such courtyard, her fingers grazing petals fallen from a vine. Antony's eyes linger on the simplicity of the gesture, her hand against the leaves, the attentiveness with which she moves through space. You find your own breath slowed, drawn into this choreography of presence. Wind and lamplight as night deepens, the city softens. Voices recede into murmurs, fountains whisper in stone basins, and the river's quiet ripples measure time in silence. Together, Cleopatra and Antony wander beneath arches and through gardens, their words few, their silences abundant. The intimacy of their walk unfolding without announcement. At last, they reach the city's edge. Before them, the Tigris bends, its surface aglow with lantern light-like stars scattered upon the earth. Cleopatra leans lightly into Antony's shoulder. The city breathes below, hushed yet alive, and you sense history itself, pausing to allow such tenderness to endure. And as you step back, leaving the courtyard behind, you feel the night's lessons settle over you, that even in times of alliances, politics, and empires, there are hours of softness, of quiet discovery, of gentle human connection. Antioch at night is a living memory of such moments, and you carry the hush of lanterns, the scent of jasmine, and the slow, careful rhythm of steps into your own awareness, allowing the city's serenity to linger in your mind long after the streets are empty. The Mediterranean stretches outward like a sheet of liquid glass, catching the first pale light of dawn. The sea lies almost without motion, its surface broken only by faint ripples that brush against one another with a sound more sensed than heard. The horizon itself seemed softened, a place where sea and sky dissolve into one another in muted shades of blue and faint strokes of gold. You move carefully across the deck of the ship, fingertips grazing the polished railing, and in that touch you feel the vessel's subtle tremor, as if it too breathes in rhythm with the water. The air is cool and still, touched with salt and a whisper of herbs carried from some unseen shore. In this fragile quiet, you recognize how vast silence can be, how it can stretch outward until it feels as infinite as the sea itself. Cleopatra walks beside you, her steps measured, her gaze fixed unwaveringly upon the distant horizon. Serenity radiates from her posture, yet beneath it you sense a deeper tension, quiet and contained, like hidden currents beneath the surface of calm water. Around you, the fleet waits in perfect readiness, sails furled with precision, ropes coiled in ordered spirals, oars stacked against the rising light. The men and women on deck move with deliberate care, their voices hushed, each task performed with the discipline of ritual. Even the gulls wheeling overhead seem to understand the nature of this pause, their wings slicing the air in silence, their cries withheld. The bow. Antony stands, his figure steady, his presence grounding. He leans against the railing, eyes turned toward the distant coastline, listening to the sigh of waves. You watch how his attentiveness mirrors Cleopatra's own calm. Their interplay is quiet yet certain, trust expressed not in words or commands, but in the rhythm of their shared presence. This calm feels immense, swollen with unspoken weight, like the charged stillness before a storm that may never break. The deck hums with subtle life. Sailors adjust ropes, check sails, each movement practiced into quiet ceremony. Footsteps creak across the wood, blending with the lap of water against the hull. Lanterns catch the rising sun, scattering fleeting lights across polished planks. Everything conspires to magnify stillness and attentiveness, as if even the sun delays its climb, prolonging reflection. Cleopatra rests her hand lightly on the rail, fingertips grazing cool wood as though listening through it to the waves below. The gesture feels meditative, a quiet communion with the sea's pulse. Antony comes to stand beside her, his hand hovering close, mirroring her rhythm. Without words, their breaths align, their awareness moving in tandem with the water's sway. You sense a dialogue of presence unfolding communication that requires no speech. The horizon glimmers as sunlight spreads golden streaks across the ling. Water, Shadows of ships stretch long, fusing with mirrored rigging. For a moment, history itself seems suspended in the simplicity of Cleopatra's glance toward Antony, in his answering gaze. The tension is subtle but palpable, a gentle pull beneath the calm surface, the tide of something about to begin. You begin to notice the smaller things, the glint of a sword catching morning light, the faint stir of canvas against the mast, the hushed voices of sailors arranging supplies. Nothing is hurried. Every sound and gesture carries a weight of intention. Even in the face of uncertain days, calm is tended like a garden. Cleopatra sees it too, the quiet signals exchanged among the crew, and unspoken coordination. Antony notices as well, but neither disturbs the rhythm. Together they honor its harmony. The sea murmurs of unseen tides shifting beneath the surface. From the shore drifts the thread of time, mingling with salt air in a fragrance both grounding and entrancing. Cleopatra breathes deeply, steadying herself. In the scent, Antony mirrors her, shoulders relaxed, though his eyes remain vigilant upon the horizon. You realize that tension is not always loud. Sometimes it waits silently, biding its time, gathering strength until release. Within that waiting lies its own quiet joy, born of presence and attentiveness. Above, a gull arcs through the pale sky, its shadow brushing the deck before vanishing. Cleopatra's eyes follow, empire dissolving into the purity of wings. Antony acknowledges it too, with the slightest nod. In that silence flows their understanding care, expressed in attention, not words. The sun climbs higher, its glow deepening into a warmth that spreads slowly across the water. The surface shifts from silver to gold, each ripple catching light as though the sea itself has been set to shimmer. Shadows shorten, edges sharpen, and the outlines of the surrounding ships emerge with striking clarity, sails and masts etched. Against the brightening horizon, Cleopatra and Antony walk the deck at an unhurried pace, their movements deliberate yet unforced, the small details of posture and glance revealing an unspoken coordination. Around them, the air hums not with noise or urgency, but with expectation, a quiet thrill woven into stillness. You pause, listening. The interplay of wind and water forms a subtle harmony. A breeze lifts just enough to stir the heavy sails, sending ripples across the otherwise placid surface. Through the wooden planks beneath your feet comes a faint tremor, delicate but undeniable, proof that even in calm waters, the world never rests. Cleopatra's gaze follows the rise and fall of the waves, her breathing measured to their rhythm, as if aligning herself with the sea's quiet cadence. Antony mirrors her stillness, his stance steady, attentive, his presence an anchor alongside hers dot as morning ripens. The horizon remains unbroken, endless layers of blue and gold folding into one another. Together, Cleopatra and Antony stand, watching the subtle stirrings of current and the shifting light. Reverence fills the silence, a mindfulness too complete to require words. It feels as though the Mediterranean itself participates, lending its tide, its wind, its sun to this suspended rehearsal for the demands of history yet to come. You step back, carrying with you the lesson of this suspended moment, that before tides turn and choices must be made, there exists stillness worth honoring. The sea teaches patience. Cleopatra and Antony embody presence. The horizon holds promise and mystery together. You breathe deeply, attuned to the swell of waves and to the calm that rests between two figures whose fates will shape the world, yet who, for now, simply stand with the unbroken horizon before them. Alexandria lies beneath a quiet sky, its streets emptied of noise, as though the city itself were holding its breath. Lanterns glow faintly in the distance, their light pooling softly across worn stones, while shadows lean long against colonnades and walls. You walk slowly along the quay, where the scent of the Nile mingles with traces of salt from the sea and the faint dryness of sand carried by the wind. The river moves with steady purpose, indifferent to the rise and fall of kings, to the ambitions of empires. Alexandria has long grown accustomed to shifting powers, yet tonight an unfamiliar hush clings to every corner, every doorway. Every arch. Cleopatra moves with deliberate steps, her presence like a pale flame in the dim light. Courtiers drift beside her, silent, their tread muffled, as though the city itself demands discretion. You notice the quiet tension in her shoulders, the sweep of her gaze as it takes in every flicker of movement, every patch of darkness. The city feels at once familiar and estranged, veiled in anticipation, its very air vibrating with restrained expectation. The marketplace, usually bursting with color and voices, is shuttered. Stalls stand closed, awnings tied down, crates stacked tightly. A scattering of goods remains: figs drying in baskets, jars of oil, clay pots arranged and abandoned. The breeze stirs them lightly, making faint music on the cobblestones. A stray cat slips through the stillness, its careful steps echoing the rhythm of the subdued city. Cleopatra pauses at the edge of the square, trailing her hand along a column's cool stone, drawing steadiness from its permanence. In that gesture lies the memory of centuries, the reminder that walls outlast the fleeting anxieties of men. At the harbor, the Nile carries the glow of lanterns and firelight in shifting reflections. Ships rest against the current, sails furled, ropes taut yet idle, their hulls creaking softly. Cleopatra leans over the water, watching its surface shimmer beneath the moon. With a fingertip, she sketches invisible shapes upon it, as though communing with what has passed and what may yet come. Antony's presence is near, unseen but certain, his watchfulness blending with the quiet currents of river and city alike. In the palace, chambers lie hushed, corridors amplifying even the faintest footfall. Lanterns burn steadily along the walls, their glow softening the edges of columns and tapestries. Shadows linger in folds of fabric, shifting with each breath of air. Servants move with a kind of ritual quiet, their gestures economical, almost reverent, as though aware that every sound carries weight tonight. Cleopatra walks these halls with deliberate grace, her eyes drawn to subtleties others might miss. A curtain stirred by a hidden draught, the gleam of bronze door handles, the faint shift of cooler air spilling through open thresholds. Every detail is a thread in a web of awareness, weaving her into the city's larger rhythm of stillness. You, too, begin to notice the palace itself seems alive, listening. Beyond its gates, Alexandria waits under watch. Soldiers stand steady, their presence more symbolic than forceful. Their movements are minimal, controlled, as if measured against the fragile quiet resting over the harbor. Cleopatra passes among them, acknowledged with nods, their silence mirroring her own. The city's pulse beats low, steady yet taut, every pause sharpened by awareness. There is no chaos, no panic, only a watchful calm that commands respect more powerfully than any trumpet call. At the docks, small boats rock gently, tied with frayed ropes to wooden posts. Water murmurs against their hulls, the sound soft as a whispered prayer. Lanterns aboard a few vessels scatter golden light across the river's ripples, bending into broken reflections that stretch toward the far shore. Cleopatra rests her fingers on the railing of one boat, feeling the faint vibration of the current beneath. Antony joins her, his steps measured, their movement aligned as though choreographed. They do not hurry. Their rhythm mirrors the city itself, attentive, patient, quietly braced for what must come. The streets beyond lie nearly empty, yet traces of life linger. A dog shifts in its sleep, a candle flickers high in a shuttered window, and somewhere in shadow a clock keeps time. Without sound, Cleopatra walks with deliberate calm, her presence steady, Antony close beside her, unobtrusive yet vigilant. Together they move in rhythm with the city's breath, each step magnified by silence. In this hush, even the smallest gesture feels weighty, a reminder that silence often carries truths too heavy for words. Behind the palace, a secluded garden glows with lantern light. Fountains murmur, vines hang heavy with blossoms, and the air carries the mingled scents of earth and water. Cleopatra pauses, her hand brushing a single petal, as if drawing strength from its delicate persistence. Antony lingers nearby, his gaze turned outward, scanning the horizon for signs of Rome. The moment feels suspended, balanced between stillness and anticipation, sanctuary and inevitability. As night deepens, Alexandria folds into shadow, softened by the glow of lanterns. Along terraces and pools, Cleopatra and Antony move slowly, their reflections stretching across calm water. The city stands poised between memory and change, every courtyard and street a silent witness, as though all Alexandria itself were holding its breath. The distant presence of the approaching army is more vibration than sound, a whisper carried on the air, like water shifting beneath a ship's hull. Cleopatra halts, her gaze sweeping the horizon with quiet intensity. Antony lingers close, alert yet undemanding, honoring the serenity that still cloaks the city. Alexandria itself seems wrapped in a cocoon of stillness, preserving memory and intention. You, too, sense the weight of anticipation, learning from the quiet its lessons of patience, awareness, and the subtle power of restraint. As the night deepens, Alexandria remains folded in silence. Lanterns waver softly, fountains murmur, and shadows unravel like threads across worn stone. Cleopatra and Antony stand side by side, not speaking, but absorbing the atmosphere, the city's slow, measured heartbeat before change. In this silence, you feel kinship, resonance with a rhythm larger than yourself. Dawn will alter the city, armies will arrive, power will shift, yet this moment holds steady. Alexandria breathes inward, and you carry its hush with you, a reminder of calm in the face of uncertainty. The moon pours its pale silver light over Alexandria, slipping quietly between the columns of the royal tomb. Shadows stretch long across the polished stone floors, bending gently around walls that have endured centuries. The air is still, heavy, with incense and the cool breath of marble, as though the tomb itself exhales memories. Each step you take falls muted, absorbed by the silence, and you sense how the quiet is not emptiness, but a presence alive, listening. Balanced between remembrance and expectation, Cleopatra advances through the corridors with measured grace, her movements tuned to the rhythm of the place. Moonlight gathers in her eyes as she passes towering pillars carved with the stories of gods and kings. The chambers hold a paradoxical quality, vast in scale yet intimate in feeling, echoing the same duality she carries, commanding, luminous, and yet contained. The serenity of the tomb seeps into you, a calm energy radiating from the stone. Each shadow holds its own narrative, each flicker of light a whispered fragment of time. Candles burn in narrow niches, flames bending to the faint drafts threading the passageways. Cleopatra's footsteps blend with the subtle murmur of hidden channels of water carved deep into the stone. Every gesture is deliberate, as if her presence itself acknowledges the sacred order of the place. Her hand brushes the reliefs, tracing grooves carved by artisans long gone. And for a moment, history is felt not as a story, but as texture beneath her fingertips. She pauses before a low altar, where lotus blossoms lie in offering. Their fragrance rises gently, a reminder of life and renewal persisting within stone's permanence. Antony's presence lingers like a memory beside her, protective and unseen. The tomb, silent yet resonant, gathers the echoes of choices, alliances, and lives entwined with destiny, folding time into a single timeless breath. A narrow shaft of moonlight stretches across the floor, leading toward the far wall where Cleopatra rests. Her fingers brush the cool stone, tracing the contours of the chamber, observing the subtle interplay of light and shadow. She pauses, inhaling the heavy scent of incense mingled with earth, letting the quiet guide her thoughts. The stillness is not fear, but acute awareness, a recognition that even calm carries weight unseen. The tomb itself feels sentinel-like, guarding secrets that will endure long after footsteps vanish. The walls are lined with reliefs of gods and pharaohs, their stony gazes frozen in eternity. Cleopatra's eyes follow the carvings, imagining the lives they represent, the authority and wisdom preserved in every line. A faint breeze drifts through a hidden opening, lifting the soft silk of a curtain, a gentle motion that animates the tomb with breath-like life. Candle flames flicker, transforming the stone into shifting shapes, a subtle choreography of light and shadow that draws attention and soothes the mind. She approaches a small pool at the chamber's center, its surface still and reflective. Moonlight and flame intermingle in the water, forming a living mosaic of stone and light. Cleopatra leans, letting her fingers trail through the cool resistance. Antony's presence is imagined nearby, a quiet echo, the weight of shared history palpable. In the air, the simplicity of the gesture touching water, observing light feels profound, a reminder that even amid empire and grandeur, connection to the immediate, tangible world carries its own quiet power. The space envelops you, imparting a lesson. In presence, attentiveness, and the serenity that comes from mindful observation. The tomb stretches into shadow, corridors winding and intimate, each turn revealing quiet alcoves and niches. Cleopatra moves deliberately, her eyes tracing the inscriptions along the walls, absorbing the artistry and wisdom left by generations before her. A faint scent of myrrh rises from hidden burners, mingling with stone and water to create a sensory experience both grounding and ethereal. The air is charged with quiet energy, encouraging mindfulness, reflection, and gentle awareness. She pauses at a niche holding small offerings, delicate jars of oils and incense, tokens of devotion. Candlelight flickers across her features, casting soft shadows that animate her presence. Antony's imagined presence lingers, subtle yet palpable, a reminder of partnership and trust. Every motion she makes is measured, deliberate, a meditation in itself. Even the smallest gestures, the brush of a fingertip across carved stone, the tilt of her wrist to catch a reflection of light, become acts of intention and presence. The moon climbs higher, bathing the tomb in silver light. Cleopatra enters the main chamber, where the central sarcophagus rests, polished and silent. Her footsteps echo gently, her gaze calm and contemplative. The quiet is profound, almost tangible, wrapping the space in a meditative cocoon. Stone, flame, water, and shadow interact in subtle harmony, and the stillness seeps into your own awareness. Each detail, each movement, carries meaning, expressed not in proclamation, but in gentle, attentive restraint, a whisper of presence resonating across the ages. Cleopatra pauses near the sarcophagus, candlelight casting soft patterns across the chew. Walls. Beyond the tomb, the world feels distant and irrelevant. Here, only awareness, presence, and subtle motion hold significance. Moonlight shifts gently, tracing fleeting shapes on the stone floor. Antony's imagined presence lingers like a quiet anchor, a reminder that even in solitude, connection persists. This night is not defined by spectacle or drama, but by the intimate practice of observation, attention, and acceptance. The chamber grows quieter still. Shadows deepen, flickering only where candlelight grazes the carved stone. Cleopatra closes, her eyes briefly, inhaling the scents of lotus, incense, and polished marble. Her breath is slow, deliberate, syncing with the still rhythm of the tomb. Each sound and movement is magnified by its rarity, forming a subtle symphony of perception. Even the faintest ripple in the pool, the lightest whisper of air, becomes a meditation on presence and the passage of time. The night flows in quiet reverence. Cleopatra's eyes trace moonlight across stone, reading the whispers of history. Antony's presence lingers, felt though unseen, a companion in this sacred stillness. Silence teaches, stillness holds meaning, and even lives of grandeur resonate. In subtle observation, the tomb, shadows, and soft breaths of the moment envelop you, offering calm reflection, a meditation on legacy, awareness, and the gentle strength of quiet. Alexandria lies beneath a horizon painted in muted shades of twilight, where the Nile glows faintly, reflecting the gentle retreat of the sun. Streets that once thrummed with markets, laughter, and the shuffle of sandals now rest in quiet observation. Lanterns, still lit despite the advancing dusk, cast pools of golden light across smooth stones, as if attempting to preserve the memory of life that once flowed through these avenues. You walk slowly along the quays, feeling the hum of history vibrating faintly beneath each footstep, as if the city itself remembers every whispered negotiation, every quiet glance, every decision that shaped kingdoms. The libraries lie silent, their vast halls emptied of scholars and the rustle of parchment. Shelves rise like sentinels, holding the remnants of knowledge once shared, while faint echoes of turning pages and ink meeting papyrus linger in the air. Shadows stretch across the floors, traces of curiosity and debate that have long passed, yet persist in memory. The scent of aged paper mingles with a whisper of candle smoke, a reminder of eras when learning thrived. Here, silence is potent, speaking louder than any proclamation, decree, or trumpet ever could. The Nile moves onward with patient grace, indifferent to the turbulence of human ambition. Its currents carry away the remnants of ships and banners, reflecting lantern light along the shore. Tiny flashes of silver beneath the water mark the passage of fish, a quiet celebration of life's continuity. Cleopatra's legacy flows in rhythm with the river etched into stone, reflected in structures, and whispered through stories that endure beyond the rise and fall of empires. The city mourns softly, without spectacle or lamentation. Palaces stand dim, their halls still holding faint impressions of vibrant lives. Courtyards bloom with creeping plants and fragrant herbs, nature claiming its share of memory. The air is thick with reflection, carrying hints of lotus, myrrh, and river mud. Every stone, pillar, and column participates in this quiet act of remembrance, allowing history and imagination to coexist without contention. Beyond the city, the horizon stretches wide across desert and river, where light and shadow blend into indistinct lines. The last warmth of the day fades into indigo and violet, marking the slow passage from one era to another. Alexandria, once a jewel of empires, rests quietly in this liminal space. Its stories persist in the whispers of wind through empty streets, in the gentle play of light on water and stone. Even as power shifts, the memory of a queen, her decisions, presence, and influence remains woven into the enduring fabric of the city. The harbor, once bustling with vessels from across the Mediterranean, now rests in serene reflection. Small boats drift lazily on calm waters, lanterns glinting like faint stars mirrored in the ripples. The sea itself seems to acknowledge the passage of time, rolling gently without urgency, carrying with it the soft traces of trade, diplomacy, and voyages that will never be repeated. Cleopatra's story, though concluded, lingers in these movements, in the subtle patterns of waves and wind, in the quiet negotiation between water and stone that mirrors the subtle negotiation of power and presence she once mastered. You walk along the riverbanks, noticing how shadows lengthen, brushing softly against reeds and lotus blossoms. Birds settle quietly in trees, their calls muted as evening deepens. Each sound, each ripple, seems amplified in the profound hush that envelops the city. Lanterns shimmer in the distance, reflecting off stone facades and water alike, illuminating courtyards and pathways that once teemed with life. Alexandria's. Quiet is not emptiness but presence, the lingering pulse of the city that has endured the rise and fall of empires, that remembers the gentle yet deliberate rhythm of its people, their dreams, their observations, their subtleties. Along the edges of Alexandria, gardens lie tranquil, their blooms catching the last glow of sunset. Soft petals brush against marble steps, and fountains trickle gently, as if soothing the worn stones of the palace. The air is a delicate mixture of jasmine, myrrh, and the cool mist rising from the Nile, creating a sensory tapestry that seems to breathe with the city. Cleopatra's influence is present in every arrangement, the rhythm of courtyards, the careful placement of fountains, the subtle choreography of space that guides movement and attention. History here is not abstract. It is alive, vibrant in quiet gestures and hidden details. Night deepens. The horizon fades into deep blues, early stars shimmering above. The Nile mirrors the subtle light, ripples catching each whisper of wind, each hint of current. Lanterns sway gently on their posts, casting soft, dappled patterns across the cobblestones. Shadows stretch into alleys and corners, folding the city into itself. You pause, inhaling slowly, attuning to the subtle rhythms of river, stone, and sky. Alexandria feels alive, yet hushed, a place holding centuries of memory without urgency. In this quiet twilight, Alexandria becomes a lullaby. The Nile murmurs softly, lanterns blink with gentle rhythm, and shadows drift like slow currents across stone and water. Cleopatra's presence lingers in the corridors, a quiet testament to a queen's measured care for life, legacy, and detail. Let your thoughts slow as the stars rise higher and the lanterns dim further, the river casting silver threads across the horizon. Breathe deeply, attuning to the calm, letting it settle into your senses. Drift with the water's rhythm. Follow the subtle dance of light and shadow, and carry the memory of careful observation, presence, and gentle influence within you. The city whispers, lanterns flicker, the river flows, and you float, weightless, held softly in history's enduring embrace. Now, let your eyelids grow heavy, surrendering fully to the quiet. Each gentle ripple of the Nile, every distant flicker of lantern light, and the soft whisper of wind through deserted gardens becomes a lullaby of rest. Feel yourself drifting, weightless and calm, as Alexandria moves silent through the night. Its streets, waters, and shadows carry centuries of stories, folding them gently into the darkness. Let the city's serene rhythm guide you, easing every thought and tension, carrying both history and your own awareness softly into sleep. Let go, breathe slowly, and feel the calm enfold you completely, drawing you toward dreams as boundless as the horizon, as endless as the river's flow. End of script. Thank you for listening, everyone.